Monday to you. Welcome back to the front porch. Time for another episode of Monday Meditations. Grab your Bibles, open to Matthew chapter 5. Today we're going to be looking at verses 31 and 32. Just 2 verses as a section of this great Sermon on the Mount, but of great, profound message that needs to be addressed, needs to be studied, and needs to be meditated upon now as much as ever. And looking at this, of course, Jesus is talking about teachings on divorce. And when you go back to that day and age, and again, keep in mind what we're talking about with this chapter and this sermon, Jesus was addressing things that had been said in the old law. And he's showing that he didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it, to bring it to fruition, to bring about an end to that system and a new covenant, but it was a fulfillment of it, not a destruction of it. There was a purpose for the law of Moses, and that was to make sin known. In many ways, it was a protection. As a matter of fact, there were 2 different schools of thought concerning divorce as Jesus walked the earth and was dealing with these mindsets. One was from the school of Shammai, where took Deuteronomy chapter 24 and the writing of a divorcement and giving a writing of divorce to a wife, put that into the grounds of finding some unpleasantry in the wife or something that was defraudulent. They took it to a strong level of only being adultery. However, there was the school of Hillel that would allow for any reason whatsoever. You'll see that over in Matthew chapter 19 as he's addressing that mindset of getting a divorce for any cause. Matter of fact, they'd gone so far in that school of thought to say that you could get a divorce for your wife spoiling your dinner. Now, something else to keep in mind as we think about this before we go into this text, this was a primarily written to men in that culture in that day and age. Only a man could give a divorce to his wife. She couldn't go and divorce him. Now, in some cases, she could go before a court system situation and plead for one, and if it was viable, then they would make the man give her a writing of divorce. But this writing of divorce, of course, was for a protection of the woman and future relationships down the road. But Jesus would address this here also in Matthew chapter 19, and going back to the original idea behind this. Remember, before Moses was, Jesus is. He is I am, the ego eimi, I am that I am, the self-existent one. He wills himself to be. He is God. And so what he has to say is on a higher level, and he takes it back just as he did with the idea of murder, with the idea of adultery. He takes it back to the heart of the matter, and he does so here as well. A little bit wording a little bit differently in this, because remember, he's addressing not the specific law per se, as much as he's addressing what they turned it into by the time he walked this earth. So let's go ahead and read verses 31 and 33. Jesus says, "It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement." Again, that's Deuteronomy 24. You can go read the first 4 verses of that. It breaks down why this was what he's referencing and what they should have understood. 32 says, "But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, committeth adultery." Again, keeping in mind the mindset that they had, the men were somewhat given over to promiscuity in any way they wanted, and to get around that, they would just write a bill of divorcement and go have some other woman. And Jesus is saying this has never been the case. This is not what it's supposed to be. Jesus saw, as God, he saw marriage the way he set it up in the beginning. God ordained marriage to be between one man and one woman for life. And as we see that in our culture and our society today here in the United States, I was looking at one study on this, and it says we're looking at roughly 44.6% of marriages ending in divorce, which sounds a little bit better than what numbers have been in the past. They are down. But of course, so is marriage. Many people are choosing not to go into the commitment of a marriage and just go into the debauchery of living together and things of this nature. What we're looking at with those numbers is saying roughly 6.5 marriages, out of 6.5 marriages, you're going to have 2.9 of them end in divorce. That's the numbers that we're looking at. It was also said in that study that the average length of a marriage in the United States is roughly 8.2 years. That's really sad that that's the That's the majority of relationships. And marriage relationships are only going to last 8.2 years. That was pretty low, and the highest one that they had in that study was in Italy, and that was 18 years was their rate. But another interesting statistic that they showed in that was that 6%, only 6% of those marriages that end in divorce choose reconciliation, to come back together and strengthen that marriage. But this is an interesting study. They said that out of those 6% that did reconcile, 72% of them remained faithful throughout their lives. There's something to be said about that, because of the relationship being strengthened through forgiveness, absolutely. And that's what God wants as well, is for us to be a forgiving people like He is. But nevertheless, he goes back to this text, and looking at what Jesus was saying, you've heard that it's been said this way. You've heard that in the law, whosoever puts away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. A seal saying that you relinquish all of your rights as a husband to this wife, or her as a wife to you as a husband. You relinquish that. You get rid of that. You abolish it. And so that's what the law had said, Deuteronomy 24, again, to protect the woman. But he contrasts that in verse 32 by saying, but I say unto you, just like he did in other cases. And he speaks with this authority. I say unto you that whosoever. Now notice that word whosoever. Anyone. This transcends the Jewish culture, the Jewish system, the law. This is whosoever, Jew or Gentile alike, because they're going to answer to God. Now I know he's speaking to them primarily, but we need to understand the big picture of this and what Jesus is saying. Whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication. This is the only one. This is the only cause that is legitimate for a putting away of your wife. Of course, now you can look at Romans chapter 7 and see death, of course, but that's not putting away. That's death taking. That's a fulfillment of an oath, of a vow that's made at the marriage, till death do us part. And so that looses one, of course, from the contract, if for lack of better terms, of the agreement, the oath, the promise, the commitment of marriage, and frees one to marry another. But Jesus said, if you put away your wife for any reason other than fornication, you commit adultery. You cause her to commit adultery. And you causeth her to commit adultery. He goes on and says, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery as well. Under that system that they'd taken these schools of thought and brought them into some dangerous territories by this time. Many of the Jewish men were thinking that you can't be guilty of committing adultery. Only way you can commit adultery is if you have a relationship with a woman who is married to somebody else. But you can be married and have relationships all over the place. And they had totally abused the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of a relationship between a husband and wife the way God intended for it to be. As a matter of fact, if you go back to the Old Testament, and the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi chapter 2 and verse 13, he says, or 2:16, he says that he hates putting away. God despises putting away. Now, he was talking about his relationship as being married to the children of Israel. And he says, because you've dealt treacherously with the wife of your youth, I will put you away. I have put you away. And he did that. But it was an extreme situation, like he's saying here. Jesus makes it very pointed, except it be for fornication. And some translations have sexual immorality and things of this nature. And sometimes that gets hard to understand. And sometimes we use that as the Jews were using at this time. She spoiled my dinner, I can get a divorce. Well, fornication, they had lustful thoughts, they looked at pornography, they did. That's not the word. We understand, if you say the word fornication, average person of understanding knows what you're talking about. You throw out the word sexual immorality and people are a little scratching their head. Well, what exactly does that mean? Jesus wanted them to know that it was very specific. As a matter of fact, if you go over and you look at Matthew chapter 19, where he's addressing this again, when he tells them this same thing, except it be for fornication, that's the only reason one can divorce and remarry. They said, well, if this is the way it is, it's better for a man not to marry at all. They understood the seriousness, the gravity of what Jesus was saying. Do we understand? As his children, as his people, do we understand and appreciate the gravity of the marriage relationship? The first place to start understanding that is to understand that we are the bride of Christ as His church. And the faithfulness that we have as Christ being the husband, as we being the bride, the faithfulness that He offers to us, we should offer in return to Him. The same idea behind love. We love Him. Why? Because He first loved us. We're faithful to Him because He's faithful to us. Hebrews 13 tells us, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. God is making an oath to us, a promise that He will be there. Can we say the same? Many of us have decided to get into that marriage relationship. My wife and I have been married for 25 years. And I'm just as committed to her today as I ever have been, and hope to be more committed in the future than I am today. And I believe the same for her. But one of the reasons why that we are doing that is because of love, absolutely. But not just a love for each other. A love for God. A love for when Jesus said, I say, I'm going to listen. And she says, when Jesus says, I say, she's going to listen. And we're joined together in that holy state of matrimony till death does us part. Because that's the way God intended for it to be. And there's a blessing in that goes far beyond anything this world has to offer. Because I can see my wife as a child of God, a soul for which Jesus died. She can see me as a child of God, a soul for which Jesus died. And if I'm living my life for the Lord as I should, I'm going to be the husband I should be to her. If she's living her life the way the Lord intends her to live her life, she'll be the wife that she's supposed to be for me. That's something on which we can meditate this Monday and every day. May God bless you till we meet again.